not looking at MTHFR SNPs and other genetic predispositions that are setting the stage for these kids? Why aren't we checking to see who, this is not a one-size-fits-all.
If they made, as Dale keeps saying, penicillin mandatory, I'd be, I don't know, guess dead.
And that's the problem. You cannot have a one-size-fits-all for everybody on anything medically. It's just not feasible. Every one of us are as individual as our fingerprints. Every one of us respond to things differently. Okay, maybe the majority of people respond this way, but look, our bodies are changing. I mean, the toxins that we're exposed to, the foods that we're exposed to now with GMOs, the genetic expression is changing. And things aren't like they were 20 years ago, and we can't keep treating it as if this is a one-size-fits-all. It doesn't work that way. We are absolutely ruining, we are destroying an entire generation of children and those that come after them, and it's got to stop. I'm Laura Corby.
And she has organised everything for us here. So first of all, thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you for being here. It's my pleasure.
Wonderful restaurant with organic,
it's yummy food, isn't it?
Absolutely unbelievable. I'm so happy here.
I'm so glad.
I could move in here and have a little bed in here.
Good. I'm glad you're happy.
So thank you. All right, so let's talk about you. Let's talk about your, we're going to talk about...
I have 2 kids that are affected.
All right, how many children do you have in all?
2.
You have 2, okay, so both good children. So
I have a daughter who's 22 and a son who's 16.
All right, so let's go through that.
So this is probably the first thing I should show you. This was before the injury, and you can see that Chad was a very healthy, happy, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. This was a kid that would basically sit in his Johnny jumper in the door and jump and giggle and laugh and cackle and, you know.
Yes, you can absolutely see that.
Yeah, you can see it. Happiest child, and still is, by the way. I mean, I will tell you, he is an incredibly happy child. Even in the middle of his injury, he was happy the majority of the time. But between 9 and 10 months, we had quite a few vaccines that were done at that time. And I never really tied it together. He's not one of those stories that we had a vaccination done and the next morning we woke up and had a completely different child. We didn't have that experience. But what happened is between 9 and 11 months, Chad started getting all of these ear infections, and he was getting all of these respiratory infections, and he kept getting put on antibiotics. And so we'd be on him and then off him, and we'd be off for 2 weeks and then we'd be right back on him again. So huge amounts of antibiotics going on. And finally, he ended up having his 9-month shots, and I don't even remember everything that we had at that time, but it was a whole host. I know we had DTaP, I know we had Hib, I know we had the pneumococcal, we had a whole host of vaccines at that time. And about 2 weeks after that, we noticed he was feeling a little puny, and he had had ongoing ear infections and respiratory infections, so we knew at the time that he wasn't fully well, and we brought that up, and they said, no, you know, he's not running a fever, he's okay, we just need to go ahead and do this. And so we went along with it, not knowing any better. And within a couple of weeks, his ear infections popped back up, his respiratory infection got a whole lot worse, and suddenly he became this limp, ragless, lifeless rag doll. I mean, he would literally just lay in your arms and moan. It was the most pathetic thing. And then the diarrhea started. And the diarrhea went on literally for 4 months. And we ended up having him hospitalized because he was so listless that they did a spinal tap and said, something's very wrong with this child. Very, very wrong. We knew he had encephalopathy. They thought that he had pneumococcal bacteremia, meningitis, and he was in the hospital on IV antibiotics for a while, and when they released him, he was gone. The little boy that we took into that hospital was never the same again. He went to this very lifeless, listless ragdoll is the only way that I know how to explain it. And it wasn't, again, one of those overnight things. He was different the next day, but we know that the cumulative effect was just massive with this kid. So the diarrhea went on for months, and I can remember going to the pediatrician's office. This makes me... Sorry.
It's fine.
I can remember going to the pediatrician's office and being so frustrated because they kept telling us that this was our fault. that he had diarrhea because we weren't feeding him. And if you would just start getting some solid food in this kid's body, he'll quit having diarrhea. He's having diarrhea because the only thing he's getting are fluids, and if you don't start putting solid food in there. And I can remember opening a jar of baby food in the pediatrician's office and saying to the nurse, "Here's a spoon, and I want you to show me how to make that happen." Because this kid wasn't swallowing. He would swallow with a bottle, but he couldn't even use a regular nipple. We had to special order these nipples from the manufacturer because his suck reflex was all messed up. I mean, it was just a nightmare. And they keep saying, "This is you. You're not doing things correctly. If you would just feed him the right foods, if you would just do the right things, he'd be getting better." I'm like, "You don't understand. Something is very, very wrong with this child." And so it took about between 4 and 5 months for the diarrhea to resolve. And when I say diarrhea, Polly, I'm talking up the back, down the floors, the most horrific stench, just unbelievable, that went on for so long. His gut was never the same. We didn't really realize at that point that anything was wrong other than this illness. We just thought that this was an illness. We didn't know any better. And when we took him to his 12-month visit, we realized that he had been babbling and saying some words, and all of that was gone. And he suddenly was not meeting any of his developmental milestones. And he was acting like he was deaf. Everyone thought he was deaf because not only did he not startle, he didn't respond to his name, he didn't respond to the environment. If there was a car horn behind him, most kids would turn to look to see what that is. There was no response with him at all. He was just in his own world, and you could look at him, and you could even look at it in his eyes, Polly, and he was lost. He just wasn't even there. It's like the lights are on and nobody's home. And this went on for a long time. And we finally took him in for a developmental evaluation, and they thought he was deaf at the evaluation. Yeah, I can't even talk. Sorry. They thought he was deaf. And so they went to send him for hearing tests. And in the meantime, I asked one of the ladies at the developmental screening, knowing nothing about autism at the time, I said, the pediatrician that I have is not helping me. And everything that I'm bringing up and saying, look, we have all of these issues, and he's poo-pooing all of it. And in the meantime, we're having these raging ear infections and chronic, constant antibiotic use. And I said, I need a new pediatrician who will listen to me. So she gave me the name of a pediatrician. We went, and I was very fortunate that this pediatrician had 2 children with autism. And when she saw Chad, she said, you know, he's not deaf. He has a processing disorder. And at that time, that wasn't registering with me. And she said, I think he has autism, Laura. And I thought, those are the words you don't want to hear. So we took him and got some more screening done. And at 15 months, he was diagnosed with severe nonverbal autism. And I thought, okay, now that we know what this is, we really got to get on board and start dealing with it. So this child never made a sound, Polly. Happy, 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 wouldn't look at you, never made a noise. The most quiet child you will ever see. And I want to show you this because this is him at 3 years old. And this is what people need to see, that not all of these children are affected the same way. He had tremendous gastrointestinal problems that continued on throughout most of his life. And let me show you this. Sorry, it's being pokey. I really didn't think I was going to cry.
Well, you know, I think it's part of our ongoing healing that we do cry.
Yeah. So this is Chad. And this is him at 3 years old in the pool.
cry. So
Yeah,
fond
and
or
it
whatever.
happened a lot. And Chad, over the course of the next few years, he was a happy boy most of the time, unless he was having tummy issues, and that's what was happening when he had tummy issues. He was either happy and bouncing but silent, or he was having tummy issues and he was in a lot of pain. But he stopped making eye contact. He stopped any attempt at language. He stopped interacting. He wouldn't look at you. He wouldn't engage. And he was a spinner. He would find anything that could spin and find the perfect angle to put it on to make it spin, even if it was something that shouldn't spin. So that's what happened to Chad. And I think it's so important that people recognize that this is not always we got a shot today and tomorrow he was gone. For many of these kids, like Chad, there wasn't a definitive day that I can say to you, this was the shot that he got and it was different after that. But I can look back now and know definitively that the cumulative effect, the synergistic effect of the things that were happening with him put him in this position. There's no question about it.
I know how tough it is.
It's horrible to watch, and it's horrible to see these families unknowingly going through this and exposing their kids to this and not even knowing, because we believe what we've been told. We believe what we've been taught, and we believed, growing up, doctors always were the experts. They were the God. We didn't know anything. We were supposed to do what they told us to do. I question everything now.
Okay, so what do you say to people who say, but I'm sorry, but the scientific study says no correlation?
Okay, so let me
Just give me a new answer for when they do it, and just help me out.
let me just say this.
Because I'm getting aggressive with that.
Well, and I want to take it a step further, because as one parent, what I hear a lot is, well, you're just one parent and you're telling your story, and that's
Really?
that's the way it is, right?
Check those names out.
Well,
We'll go and pick
Holly,
it back up.
the other thing too is I had an autism center for 11 years. I cannot tell you the number of families that walked through that told story after story after story after story that are identical. This is not one mom saying, this is what I think is happening. This is millions upon millions of people that are being affected by this. This is not a small subgroup of people that are out for vengeance. This is a group of people that want people to be educated. So for those that say that the science is out and it's a definitive thing and it's already been decided, I'm saying to you, the science has been bought and paid for. The science is not out and definitive. We've been fed what they want us to hear. Do your research.